The morning he showed up, I thought one of the Harith drovers had left a piece of mining equipment in my east paddock. That is not an exaggeration. The shape of him, in the gray before sunrise, was wrong in the way broken machinery is wrong. Angles that don't resolve into anything you recognize. Bulk distributed, where it has no business being. I took my lantern off the post and walked out, because that is what you do at Kethward Cross when something appears in your paddock. You go and look. I had been keeping this station for 31 years. Before that, I worked the pens at Solrath Crossing, and before that, I was a boy following my father through the livestock yards at Verith Market, learning how to read an animal from 30 feet, what the set of the shoulders meant, what the position of the head meant, whether the thing in front of you was dangerous or only frightened. My father had a saying he repeated until it became the shape of my thinking. A broken thing that is still breathing has already decided to try. Your job is not to get in the way of that. What I found in the East Paddock was a dragon. I had seen dragons before, trade envoys passing through on the dust road, the occasional compact courier moving fast and low over the ridgeline, once a full war flight crossing the sky to the north that stopped every man and animal at Kethward Cross for the better part of an hour. I knew what they looked like, scaled, ridged. The older ones carrying the weight of centuries in the set of their haunches, the younger ones quick and bright-eyed, wing joints loose. This one looked like someone had taken all of that and put it through a rockfall. His scales on the left side had fused, not naturally, but wrongly, the way a wound fuses when it heals badly and in layers, the new tissue catching and knotting over the old. The burn scarring went from his left shoulder all the way to the base of his tail, and the tail itself sat wrong, dragging a little. His left hindquarters had been shattered at some point. The bone had knit, I could see that, but not straight, and the leg bore almost no weight. He had dragged himself into the paddock on 3 limbs, and the strength of his forequarters, which were still enormous, still roped with muscle, iron-gray scales still intact and catching the lantern light. He lifted his head when I came close. The eyes were amber and clear and very tired. I stood there for a moment. Then I went back to the barn and got the big feed bucket and the block of pressed grain mash we used for the Vethari draft animals when they came through. High density, rich, the kind of thing that kept a large body going when the body had been asking too much of itself for too long. I filled the stone trough in the east paddock, and I left him to it. Drover Pellin found me at breakfast and told me there was a dragon in the paddock and that we should send for someone. I told him I had already seen the dragon and that it was eating. Pellin said it was deformed, damaged, that the right thing was to send word to the nearest compact post and let them decide. I told Pellin that a thing that was eating had already decided what it wanted to do, and that I was not in the business of overriding that on its behalf. He dropped the subject. He brought it back twice more over the following week, and twice more I gave him the same answer, and eventually he stopped. The drake stayed in the east paddock. He could not fly. The wing stubs on his left side were scarred flat, and even the right wing, which was intact, he did not open. I think the effort of a full wing extension was beyond him for those first weeks. I kept the trough full. I brought him the pressed grain mash every morning, and the fresh water every evening, and I did not crowd him, and I did not try to touch the scarring, and I did not make any sudden movements near the bad leg. On the 14th day he let me stand close enough to look at the fused scales on his shoulder. I was not a dragon medic. I want to be clear about that. What I knew about large animal wound care I had learned from 40 years of working livestock, and a dragon is not a cow. But some things are the same regardless of what is underneath the hide. Infected tissue has a smell, swelling that is too tight has a look, and the way an animal holds itself when something is actively hurting versus when it is managing old pain is a language that does not change much species to species. What I saw on that shoulder was old pain, managed. He had been carrying it a long time. I brought a poultice from the barn stores, the kind we used on deep bruising in the draft animals, and I heated it, and I held it near the fused area without pressing, because I did not know if pressure on scar tissue that dense would help or hurt, and I was not willing to guess. He watched me do this. After a while he lowered his head and rested his chin on the paddock rail and closed his eyes. That became the evening routine. Scouts came through Kethward Cross 3 times over the following 2 months. The first were Ket bloodline, 2 young wardrakes moving fast, asking at the station gate whether anyone had seen a compact general, a large iron gray, heavily marked, answers to the Vethari bond call. I told them there was a large iron gray in my east paddock, badly injured, had been there 6 weeks. They looked at each other and then over the paddock rail, and then back at me, and said that was not the one they were looking for, that their general was a fangwarden and would be recognizable. Then they left. The second group was Vorhan bloodline. A month later, same question. I gave the same answer, same result. The third was a single Ashran elder, old, slow-moving, the scales the color of river clay, who arrived at the gate on a still morning and asked in a voice like gravel settling whether I had seen anything unusual in the past season. I told her about the drake in the east paddock. She asked how he moved. I described the dragging hindquarters, the fused shoulder, the intact right wing he still hadn't opened. She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked if she could come through the gate. I unlatched it and walked her to the east paddock. What happened next is the part I have trouble describing accurately because I was watching 2 very large, very old creatures, and I do not fully understand the grammar of what passed between them. The elder stopped at the paddock rail. The drake, who had been lying in the morning sun with his chin on the far rail the way he did most mornings now, lifted his head. He looked at her. She looked at him. Then she made a sound I had not heard before and have not heard since, low, below what I would call a sound at all, more a pressure in the air, and the drake answered it. He pulled himself upright on his 3 working limbs, which he did not often do, and he stood there in the paddock and let her look at him full, all of him, the scarring and the bad leg and the fused wing stubs, and she looked at all of it without looking away. She put her head down, not bowing exactly, not the formal thing I had seen compact envoys do, something older than that, something that looked more like relief than ceremony. She told me, in the same gravel voice, that the marks on his chest, which I had taken for a natural color variation in his scales, a darker iron gray in a rough pattern across his sternum, were bond marks. 3 sets, Ket, Vorhan, Ashran, all 3 lines, laid into the same animal. A fangwarden is bonded to all 3 lines simultaneously, and this happens perhaps once in 3 centuries. This particular fangwarden had gone missing in the routing at Ashran Ridge 14 months ago, and all 3 bloodlines had been searching since. I said that explained the scouts. She said it did. I asked how he was doing, in terms of the bond, whether the injury had affected it. She said the bond was intact, weakened by the long separation and the trauma, but intact. She said that was, in part, because he had not been alone. She said a bonded fangwarden who is abandoned and isolated will let the bond thread go eventually. It is not a conscious choice, simply a slow unwinding, the way heat leaves a stone, but one that is kept, fed, tended, given a morning routine and an evening poultice, and the low sound of someone else going about their work nearby, will hold on. I did not know what to say to that. She asked me my name. I told her. She repeated it once, quietly, in a way that felt like she was putting it somewhere she intended to keep it. 3 days later, the 3 bloodlines sent a full recovery flight, 12 dragons, the largest group I had ever had in my paddock, and they took Varethsal north, to the compact grounds at Kethward Reach, for a proper healing. The morning after they left, I swept the east paddock and refilled the stone trough out of habit, before I remembered there was no reason to. I latched the trough cover and went back to work.